When Bryce and Bronny James were both still in high school, there were a lot of people that thought Bryce was going to be the better player once it was all said and done. This wasn't coming from just random people either, this was coming from real basketball insiders. They said that Bryce is taller, better offensively, and just all around has a higher ceiling. I can even remember a time where I thought Bryce could eventually be the better player, but as time has gone by, that really hasn't been the case. This isn't to say Bryce is a bad player by any means, and he hasn't even started his senior season, so I'm not going to judge him too harshly. But the numbers he put up during Nike's AAU circuits were significantly worse than Bronny's when he was his age. Stats are definitely going to vary based on your teammates and actual role within the team, but Bryce notably struggled in his most recent games at Nike's Peach Jam tournament. He averaged just 5.6 points and 2.5 rebounds a game. Not only that, he shot just 31% from the field and 18% from 3. I'm not making any excuses, but he is 17 years old, and let's just say AAU isn't known for high efficiency, although it's definitely not something you want to see. He's also mainly a shooter, and because his three-pointers weren't falling, it dragged down his entire stat line a lot. Shooting slumps are gonna happen. I wouldn't really freak out over a single tournament, but that actual stat line isn't really much of an outlier. His numbers throughout the Nike EYBL circuit were a little bit better, but still pretty similar. He averaged around 7 points and 2 rebounds a game throughout the event, which is significantly lower than even Bronny's numbers. But one of the biggest reasons I wanted to make this video is because about a week ago, one of the biggest recruiting websites ranked Bryce James the 100th best player in the class of 2025. They didn't just rank him the top 100 recruit, they did it literally days after that Peach Jam tournament. They moved him up 35 spots right after finishing one of the biggest AAU tournaments, averaging less than 6 points a game. And of course, this set the media on fire. Everyone is calling it special treatment, and it definitely is. And because of the whole Bronny and Lakers situation, there was more than a ton of outrage, and that outrage is now going to Bryce. Again, over something that he has zero control over. Rivals.com has him ranked as the 150th best player, and even ESPN has him ranked as a 4-star recruit. So although it was On3 that caused all this outrage, these other major websites have him ranked in a similar ballpark. If he was ranked properly, people wouldn't care, but his numbers don't back up his top 100 position or his 4-star ranking. Having him positioned where he is gives him a lot more opportunities for sure, and so does being LeBron's kid. But it definitely also sets him up to fail. People are going to have high expectations based on his ranking, even though he isn't being properly evaluated. Ranking high school recruits in general is extremely difficult, and no, I'm not justifying Bryce's placement. However, picking a top 10 to even 25 without too much controversy is possible, but once you're in the 50s and beyond, it's essentially all opinion-based. You can try to compare their numbers, but kids are playing for different schools with different roles against different competitions, so it's hard to properly gauge. This is also why you've seen several players that are in the NBA that weren't even on anybody's radar when they were in high school. It's objectively difficult to rank the 100th best player in any class for any sport. I'm sure there's multiple players that are in the top 100 that shouldn't be. And at the same time, I'm sure there's players that aren't in the top 100 that should be. You would just never know because they don't have the last name James. I even compared his numbers to some of the players he was ranked ahead of, and some of them had similar numbers while others had a lot better numbers. It kind of proved my point of how difficult it gets to rank players this far down the list. Bryce isn't a bad player at all, he's still one of the better players in the country. He's just not a must-start player, which is the case for a lot of players in AAU. That doesn't mean you aren't good. He's a lot better than people initially think, he's just not as good as the media is making him out to be. Again, not his fault. I see a lot of people saying I wish my last name was James, which I get, and I wish my last name was Bezos, however that's not how the world works. But let's take a look at what kind of player Bryce actually is. The best part about his game has got to be his shooting ability. I know he struggled at the Peach Jam tournament, but his ability to make and create shots is easily one of, if not his best trait. Bronny was extremely athletic and was a lot more of a point guard, but Bryce is a lot more of a spot-up shooting guard. He's listed right now at 6'6", so if that's really true, then he's also got good height to go along with it. And when I say he's a shooter, it's much more than just shooting threes. Bryce has multiple clips of him driving down the lane and hitting a fadeaway or spin jumper. He doesn't attack the rim as much as I'd like to see, but when he does, he actually looks really good. He's had some crazy finishes, but again, when you're mostly seeing the highlights, it's really hard to tell. I wouldn't say he's super aggressive offensively, but he does seem to be more score first than pass first. He definitely is LeBron's kid though, because he's had multiple blocks, including some pretty crazy chase down blocks. Bryce isn't the most athletic player on the floor, but he definitely can get the job done on both sides of the ball. So with all that being said, I think we need to understand who Bryce is and not let the media fool you. Bryce is a Division I basketball player. If you can even make the Sierra Canyon roster and play in Nike circuits, then you're probably going D1. He doesn't have a ton of offers right now, but he hasn't even started his senior season, which is by far obviously going to be his most important season. He can completely change the perception of him depending on how he plays, and for his sake I hope he does. You have to remember, him and Bronny don't have to play basketball, their dad's a billionaire. Honestly, if anything, Zuri's got the best life. She doesn't have the pressure to do anything related to basketball. Bryce is just a young kid playing basketball who happens to have a dad that's one of the greatest players ever. There's next to no chance him or Bronny will ever live up to their dad's standards, so the best thing for them to do is just be themselves. But let me know down in the comments what you think about Bryce as a basketball player, and please leave a like on the video to support the channel. Also subscribe if you're new for more basketball videos just like this one.